Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you for setting that context for us. Just a reminder that if anyone needs translation services, they're available in the back corner. I expect our next speaker to talk nice and quickly. Before he begins, just like to do a quick survey. So who here is a developer or researcher? Excellent. And who here is from industry? Nice. And who's somewhere in the middle? Maybe involved in a project? Yeah, there's a few. Okay, excellent. So we're going to start to speak about some consensus mechanisms, talking about challenges and opportunities in proof of stake with Ethereum core researcher, Karl Floersch.
Why, hello. Gotta wait for the music to stop. I don't do talks unless there's dramatic theme music. That's actually the crypto economics study intro music, so just remember. Anyway, so I'm Karl Floersch. I'm a Ethereum researcher, and I work on Ethereum 2.0, the exciting stuff, as well as layer 2 solutions like plasma, state channels, stuff like this, doing research. And then at the same time, I do this crypto economics in introduction, which is a kind of educational, spread the knowledge, spread the good research that's been done over the past few years in this blockchain space. So let's dive right in. Now, this is a course, so I'm going to give a little bit of an intro to the course and then a very specific kind of talk about consensus mechanisms with latency-based consensus mechanisms. And so we're going to do a little bit of learning. I'm glad to see that we have a lot of developers here. Anyway, so crypto economics and introduction, it goes over core concepts and design patterns of the crypto economics that helps build these blockchains and scaling solutions on top, as well as a coding project and just generally a central payment processor. We turn it into Bitcoin over the course of the course, and then we turn that into a plasma chain and go over state channels and stuff. So it's really fun. And so there's lectures online. Chapter 1 is released, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, all the rest are coming. There's also a book, and I've been putting together the lectures, and Jinglan Wang, who's doing a talk later today, is writing the book. And so please come say hi, it'll be a lot of fun. We can talk crypto economics. And so there's also a forum, so if you don't have a chance here, you can definitely please go on the forum, sign up, and fun stuff. It's all of us, open source, free, for everyone, just for the good people. Anyway, so now let's dive right into technical topics. We gotta learn, we gotta go fast. So this is essentially, first we're going to talk about network assumptions, just what are we assuming, and some latency-based consensus. So anyway, networks and synchrony, very, very interesting topic. So here's a little network. We've got a bunch of nodes, and they're sending messages to one another, and we're going to look at what is it about this, how can we analyze the path of this message? So we have Alice sending a message to Bob. Alice is just sending the message, and then Bob receives the message, processes it, reads it, and we're good. So the whole time that we took just now was the time to propagate the message and the time to read the message. So we can do that and we can say, okay, maybe that's 5 seconds. And so, Alice sends, and 5 seconds later, Bob has read the message. So we've communicated some information over that period of time. Now, if the latency is too long, for instance, infinite, to drop a packet, and we just, move on. So this even drop packets can be expressed with this vocabulary. So here's a little timeline of sending a message and responding with another message. So Alice sends this message, hello world. Bob says, hello world, I'm Bob. Anyway, great, we've done it. But now notice that this is exactly 5 seconds, right? Both of these are exactly 5 seconds. But really, when we're sending messages over a peer-to-peer network, we don't necessarily know how many seconds exactly it's going to take. And so that's too much information for us mere mortals. And so really what we're going to do is we're going to kind of create these models in which we view our protocols. We can say a synchronous network assumption. So that means that our messages will come at least the maximum bound is 5 seconds for our messages. And then partially synchronous, there is a maximum bound, but we don't actually know what it is. So our messages will come, wow, it keeps going back. And then asynchronous, what is going on? Asynchronous, what is actually going on? We're going backwards, y'all. Okay, hopefully it stops going backwards. Okay, so here is our secret. We're gonna look at it first synchronous. So it could take 3 seconds, it could take 4 seconds, it could take 1 second. We have no idea how many seconds this might take, but we know that by 5 seconds, our message will have been received, right? So this is very useful. And then, wow, what is going on? So I'm gonna battle with this thing. Okay, so messages are received by all interested parties. Okay, actually though, this is, I will go to war. Okay, so it's important to know that all the messages are received by the interested parties. Holy crap. Oh my lord. Technical difficulties, I apologize. This is what happens when you have 600 slides. A lot to go. So Alice is going to send it to everyone, right? It's received by everyone. Now let's talk about partially synchronous. Okay, so don't fear, we can't know exactly how long the messages will take. However, we can say that there is an upper bound, and we can just call that delta, and it can be 5 seconds, 10 seconds, we don't actually know, but we'll just like plug it in, and we can say, the message will be received by delta, and then to delta it will be received. So this is pretty realistic. Alice, is sending some messages, and they're getting intercepted, but Alice can just keep rebroadcasting. So this is kind of just like, a general, just keep flooding the network with your message until it actually goes through. Now, pretty good. Eventually it'll go through, and that helps us, prove that our protocol will be live. Now, asynchronous. This is like, we don't actually know if our message will ever go through. The time bound could be infinite, the heat death of the universe. So, Alice might send her message, and then, it gets captured, and then maybe Alice is eaten, and, everything's gone. So this is the most realistic. We don't actually know if our messages are going to go through. So the important thing here is that synchronous networks, this is a strong assumption that our message will go through within a time bound. Then partially synchronous, a little bit more of an assumption, but asynchronous, we're kind of like much more close to reality. But we can prove things about a synchronous network that we can't prove, or we can prove things about our protocol that hold in a synchronous network that we can't in an asynchronous, for instance. So, now, we're going to talk about a little bit about consensus and a consensus protocol or algorithm that only works in a synchronous network model. So, here we have our nodes, they're all running this software, and they all have their different state, right? The balances of everyone's accounts, and nonsense, etc. And right now, they are all, in consensus, they're all in agreement, right? We know that they're all agreeing on the values. And so, we're going to say, okay, Alice wants to buy a song, for instance, from Jing. And so, Alice will create a transaction, load it up, it will increment her balance, and send it over. And Jing will receive it, do the same, and now send the song over. Pretty simple, right? Well, there's a little bit of a complication. These balances, they have not received the message yet. And so we've updated it here, but we haven't updated it there. So we need to get back in sync. And so we'll have a broken solution, which is just propagate all transactions and hope for the best. So Jing is going to send the transactions to Karl and Bob. They will increment their balances, and we'll see that we're back in agreement. Great, but Mallory, the evil gerbil, is going to take advantage of the fact that our consensus protocol is pretty broken. So, double spend, right? Mallory wants to buy a song and a movie, but only pay for one of them. And so what is Mallory going to do? Mallory's going to sign 2 transactions that spend the same money, and then broadcast them individually to Jing and Alice. Now you'll notice our timeline, Mallory broadcasts it, then receives the stuff, and then we start propagating that transaction. So, Alice is changing her balance, Jing is changing her balance. Great, but notice that those balances do not match up. Instead, they have, in Jing's view, Jing was paid, in Alice's view, Alice was paid. So this is a problem. They're sending their goods, and basically Mallory wins. This is a successful attack, unfortunately. And then we propagate these messages, and we find that we end up with inconsistent states because our history of transactions are different depending on which node we are. So this is the kind of environment in which you're thinking, right? It's a decentralized protocol. There is no one source. We have to be planning for all of this. So here we have, what are we going to do about this? Well, we can look at the history, one person's history, and see what we can do. So here's basically what was happening. We had an initial state, we applied our transactions, applied this transaction, and then this transaction failed because there was not enough money. And so then, Jane did the same on her local view, but notice that those transactions were differently ordered, and so we ended up with different states. Not good, not good. So what are we going to do? Well, the reason why is this happening is because the transactions are ordered in the time that they are received. Right? Both of them received it at different times, which makes sense. They're in different parts of the world. Of course, they're going to receive their messages at different times, especially when there's an incentive to do so, to selectively propagate it. So, what can we do? Well, we can add timestamps to all of these transactions, and we can say, okay, why don't we just order it by the current timestamp? So when you're creating a transaction, you're just like setting a time that you created that transaction. We're going to order it that way. So here, the ordering makes sense. It's already working. And we'll produce a state. But here, we have to switch the order, right? And now, we reordered the transactions, produce a state, and we come out with the same account balances. So that's great. Now we're back in agreement, so we're closer. But, not again. I swear, Mallory just keeps attacking so bad. Now, one problem, lying about these timestamps. What are we going to do? Well, selectively propagating, that's a second problem. So these are two different things that you can do. You can lie, you can say, oh, I actually created this transaction yesterday, or you can selectively propagate your transaction. So Mallory creates a transaction, and she received the movie from Alice. So Alice has already given the goods, and Jane did not give the goods because, of course, the transaction didn't go through. And Mallory is going to then create a new transaction, but you'll notice that the timestamp is 10:05, which is before all the other ones. And it's not really 10:05 when it was created. So that transaction will be added to both of their histories. And then what they'll do is they'll reorder it. And unfortunately, that means that Mallory is paying Bob before Mallory pays Alice. And so even though Alice has already paid for the movie, or given the money for the movie, we end up with a balance where Alice did not actually get Mallory's money. Instead, Bob did. That's not good. We do not like that. So the attack was successful. What are we going to do? Selectively propagate. This is another problem. Of course, if Mallory creates two conflicting transactions, just as she did in the case of the double spend, Mallory can send one to one, one to the other, and then we end up with different account balances. Of course, because this is they haven't received all of the messages. So what are they going to do? We have to wait until it's they're kind of in sync. So then we can have a full state. We need to agree on all of the messages, and then we can reorder them to eventually get the same state again. So this is kind of the core issue. So we'll actually have consensus if one, late transactions are rejected. That's an important piece. And then the second thing is that we guarantee that all transactions are seen by all parties. Right, so these are the two things that if we have, we will have kind of consensus. And this actually expands to all these sorts of blockchain systems. It's not just a simple payment mechanism. So then we just take out that annoying Mallory, checkmark, hallelujah. So how? Well, funnily enough, Vitalik put together a post, a guide to 99% fault tolerant consensus. And 99%, that's pretty fault tolerant. That means that, if Alice and Jing are on a network and it's just full of malicious actors, they can use this, protocol, this algorithm, and stay in consensus. It's actually pretty surprisingly good. So let's go into actually how that works. So the broken solution is pretty bad, but there is actually a working solution in a synchronous model, but we'll talk about that later. So in our other one, we always accepted transactions, but that was bad because, of course, we can lie about the timestamp. So what do we have to do? We have to add a timeout to each one of these transactions. So we only accept them if they are before the timeout. Now, the timeout is calculated. This is the formula. And it shows, here's the T for the timestamp, which you can see right here. And then we have D, which is an upper bound for the time to propagate messages. That upper bound is baked into our synchrony assumption. So it's 5 seconds is what we were talking about before. And K is the number of observers. So let's go into this. So currently we have 5 seconds, for instance, as our upper bound network synchrony assumption. Now, what we can do is we can say, okay, what is the number of observers? So Mallory is going to create the transaction, send it to Alice with 5 seconds, and Alice is going to sign the transaction saying that she saw it. So now K is equal to 1, Jing will do the same, K is equal to 2, Bob will do the same, k is equal to 3, right? So now we can just plug and play, figure out what our timeout is, and see when we're going to start rejecting transactions for that time. So here's a little, a timeline which shows when we accept and reject transactions. Here we accept, there we reject. And so right here, if the transaction is received before 10:20, then Alice will sign and everything will be good. However, if it's after that time period, Alice will no longer sign. However, these two, because they have more signatures already, they're okay with it, right? So then, as we go down the line, we get more stringent with the number of transactions, signatures that we require. So here, of course, the longer it takes, right, the more signatures, the more people have to have seen that message. It makes sense. The more time, the more people saw your message. So, it makes sense. Now, what does this do? This gives us those two properties. Late transactions are rejected. If we try to send in more transactions, but it's past the maximum timeout, then we're just going to ignore them. And the second thing is that all of these transactions are seen by all honest participants, right? Everyone has seen that message by the end of the timeout. And this is actually baked into our synchrony assumption, which is the kind of weird part. The way that we're modeling our things actually tells us, why actually gives us this property, right? So the synchronous network allows us to say that the message has been propagated. So let's do the double spend again, but this time with our new revamped protocol. So we're going to send the message, and then once the message is received, we're going to rebroadcast it, and everyone's going to be signing these messages and rebroadcasting them, and then waiting until the timeout. And now notice, by the time the timeout has happened, everyone has seen every message, and we've reordered the messages based on the timestamp, and we have consensus. So attack has failed. So we are actually able to maintain consensus. Great. And we'll send in the movie and all that kind of stuff. But there is a bit of a problem. Vlad always says, what's your synchrony assumption though? What's that synchrony assumption? And it turns out our synchrony assumption is pretty strong. We're assuming a synchronous network. That means that messages will always be received within 5 seconds. But in a partially synchronous network, this guarantee goes away. And so we no longer know what the upper bound is. And so what we get is this protocol just completely and totally breaks down. This algorithm totally breaks down. Because we'd have to wait an unknown amount of time for our transactions to go through. Right? But don't fear, it's all good. Because Casper is here. Casper, doesn't actually, it works very well in both a partially synchronous and an asynchronous network. So, what we can actually do is we can layer these protocols on top of one another, fighting to get it down with this clicker. And then we can say, okay, instead of transactions, we're talking about Casper blocks. And so with that, this clicker. With that, we actually get this superpowered Casper potentially, right? We can use these things and combine these techniques to get the ultimate protocol. So in other words, in the good case, where our synchrony assumption holds, we get 99% fault tolerance, and in the bad case, where our network is unreliable, we actually get our Casper guarantees, which are already pretty good. So that's basically that essence of our assumptions are going to color the security that we think our protocols are going to have. That is an important thing that we need to both be clear about and communicate. And so, in the course, of course, we're going to build all these things and kind of use these techniques that I was just talking about, use the synchrony assumptions, figure out what exactly our protocols are made of, the kind of bread and butter. And so, of course, we've got lectures, we've got all the good stuff. And this is a really, really important moment, because of course there's going to be really interesting complexity that emerges from open access to financial tools that these blockchains provide, and all the different mechanisms that we create on top of it. But there's also this kind of adversarially minded framework that we need to retrofit on top of our previous internet applications, where we say, okay, what is your synchrony assumption? How does that actually affect the protocol guarantees of your protocol? We just saw that a protocol that has 99% fault tolerance, in other words, it exists in the most adversarial conditions, you could say, my protocol works under all with so many attackers, but the question is, how many, what is your assumptions? What is your guarantee based on my lord, this clicker is crazy. But nonetheless, we still get the dogs, we still get the idea, and we still get the good vibes from cryptoeconomics.study. So I'm very happy. I'm looking forward to seeing you all on the floor and learning about this stuff, because we can really take internet applications, we can take all of this decentralized stuff and create a more robust, secure, and better future for everybody. So, thank you very much. That is crypto. And this is